Hi friends who I've met and who I haven't met yet. As promised, this is a quick, unscripted video explaining a little bit about how I transformed my life from having panic attacks, depression, physical illnesses that were manifestations of stress. I had PTSD and I didn't even know it. I had a list of things that were wrong with me. Self-harm, addiction. My life was a mess. I was in a string of abusive relationships and I couldn't get any traction in life. I was miserable. And I just always had a part in me deep inside of myself that knew it could be different. I hadn't seen a lot of it being different. I'd seen a lot of pain in the world. I saw more pain than I saw peace. And sometimes I thought maybe I was just making it up. Maybe it was just fantasy. But part of me, I feel, always just knew that there was so much more out here than just suffering. I didn't believe that we were born just to suffer and die. I believe we were born to have joy and suffering before we die. So the first thing that really started me on my journey was I realized that the things that I had been taught weren't working. And I set about re-educating myself. I had done a lot of talk therapy and it wasn't working. It didn't help anything. I had been prescribed medications for depression, for anxiety, and some of them worked a little bit. The side effects weren't great, and they didn't really work as well as I had thought. And I kept feeling something deep inside kept telling me that there was a better way, there was a different way. So first I just re-educated myself. I learned about how our past and how our upbringing affects the way that we become later in life. I read a lot of books by Dr. Gabor Mate. That's Gabor. Is his first name. Mate is Mate with the accent on it. I read books by Bessel van der Kolk. That's VAN space DER space KOLK. And I read books by Peter Levine, Levine. And it taught me about how my upbringing had, through no fault of my own, and this happens to a lot of people, had programmed my nervous system to be sad and anxious and terrified and all of these things. And I realized that this had happened because both of my parents had very sad and scary upbringings, and they couldn't teach me what they didn't know. They were always sad and terrified. So as a little baby, our nervous system is sort of programmed by what our caregivers are doing. And if they're really stressed out, even if they mean well, they will program that fear into you, the little baby. It just happens. So I re-educated myself on that. And then I found out about reparenting myself. I learned that I had many little quiet and loud voices within me. I had a critic, an inner critic. I had a inner critic who never thought I was good enough, always thought I was lazy, told me that I was stupid and worthless and ugly and all of these things. And I found out that inner critic is something that's passed down from childhood. If you have a parent who is very, very critical, even if they try to do it in a good way, like they're always on you to succeed because, they're scared of failure. If they're always telling you that you're not doing enough, then you're going to feel like you're not enough. And I learned that voice is a lie. I have not been able to shut it off. I still hear it sometimes. But I don't just take what it says as fact. I argue back against it. When it tells me that I'm stupid, I just say, that's not true. And I have all of these things that have proven it wrong. And the other part of reparenting is I already had gotten pretty good at just sort of mentally checking out, just dissociating, sort of phasing out and being in my own little world to just avoid pain. And I learned to use that to my benefit, where instead of just checking out, I kind of created a imaginary split in myself where there was the person who was taking care of me, and then there was the me being taken care of. So, for example, when I'd get up in the morning, I would start thinking to myself, what would a person who loves themselves do? Instead of just getting up in the morning and eating some garbage leftovers and doom scrolling through Facebook, I realized a person who loves herself in the morning would get up and take a hot shower and have something good to eat. So at first it didn't feel natural. I really had to train myself as though I was raising myself as a child. And just like if you're correcting a child and you're trying to teach a kid the colors and they keep saying that blue is green, you don't scream at them, you don't call them stupid, you just, every time they say that blue is green, you just correct them. You say, no honey, this is green, that is blue. And you do it over and over again, and it becomes habit. And it happened over a bunch of little steps. I also learned that my self-esteem was non-existent. It was shit. I didn't believe in myself. And that's because my parents had no faith in themselves, so they had no faith in me. And I was never really considered like an actual person. I was just sort of an object. So I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust my instincts. And it turns out that I'd always had instincts. I would feel like I'd have a gut feeling about something, but I would talk myself out of it because I didn't believe it. I relearned how to trust myself by building trust slowly. In the past, every time I tried to make changes, I would try to make these huge, drastic changes. I would just say like, oh, I'm not gonna, have any more junk food, and I'm not gonna go out and party. I'm gonna, drink only water and eat only organic food, and I'm gonna go to the gym 4 hours a day and all this stuff. Sorry about the background noise. There's cute little kids playing back there. And I would fizzle out because it was just too much. So instead, I just started keeping small promises to myself. I'm like, okay, instead of getting up in the morning and doom scrolling and having my coffee, I'm going to get up in the morning and I'm going to have my coffee and I'm going to read a book. Instead of like punishing myself by having to run miles and miles and miles because I ate a family pack of Reese's peanut butter cups, I'm going to get myself smaller packages of Reese's peanut butter cups, and I'm going to just go for a walk when I talk to my friends on the phone. I found that being lovingly gentle and consistent with myself worked so much better than pushing and punishing. And I really felt like it was an act of imagination. I had to imagine that I was parenting a child, my own inner child, which I know sounds cheesy, but it's a real thing. My own terrified, scared little inner child needed parents, and needed good parents who loved her and who trusted her and wanted her to be healthy. So all those little consistent changes just build up over time, and it's such a beautiful thing. And I found it's automatic now. I mean, I used to get into these spirals where something would get me a little scared or a little upset, and I would just build upon that and snowball it, like something slightly bad would happen, like maybe my car would break down, and then I would, Oh, I'm so stupid because I didn't take it in for checkups, you know. Oh, I'm so dumb that I didn't notice it sooner. Oh, now it's going to cost thousands of dollars, and then I'm going to miss my mortgage payments, and I'm going to end up homeless, and then no one's going to take care of me, and I'm going to die on this. Like, everything was just a snowball catastrophe. And I realized that was because I had been trained not to trust myself. So at first, I had to listen to these thoughts and say, wait a minute, people have car problems all the time. My friends have car problems. Does that make them stupid? No. So think of yourself like you're your own friend. If your friend had a car problem, would you say to your friend, oh, you're so stupid? Why didn't you do this? No, you would say, oh, I'm really sorry. I hope it can be fixed. So I started speaking to myself the way that I would speak to a friend who I love. And it was just a great reduction in fear, because scary things do happen in life, but if you panic, they get worse. And speaking to myself like I was my own child and speaking to myself like I was my own friend got easier over time, because I also started speaking back to the inner critic. It would say things, you know, the old things, you know, like, oh, you're so stupid, you're whatever. You can't do this, you're incapable, you'll never do this, you'll never get, you know, to where you want to go. And I'd say, no, you don't know that. That's just an old voice. That's just a symptom. You don't have to believe it. It's just a symptom. It's kind of like you have to trust your intuition, but don't trust your thoughts. The difference is your intuition is something you feel in your body. Your thoughts are running as the words in your heads. And I learned that you don't have to believe everything that you think, and a lot of them are just programmed from earlier. The other part that made a big difference for me is that I found out that you can't think yourself out of a feeling problem. So instead of doing traditional talk therapy, I switched to doing EMDR and somatic therapy, where when I would feel terror, like abandonment terror, like, oh my gosh, I missed a payment and maybe I'm going to get late fees and then I won't be able to pay my mortgage and then I'll be homeless, or whatever, as catastrophizing, I started realizing that they all came with body feelings. And it was very familiar to when I was a little kid and my very furious father would scream and scream and yell and yell and yell, and I would cry and I would just want someone to hold me when I cried, and there was no one there. I'm there for me now. I learned how to, and I know it sounds stupid, but even just holding yourself, hold your belly, hold your heart, get a weighted blanket, give yourself hugs. When you feel like you need a hug, give yourself a hug. Feeling problems have to be healed by feeling. And notice I said healed, not fixed. Another thing that I realized was I used to think there was something inherently wrong with me, that there was something like a flaw within me, or that I was broken, and that's not true. We're not machines. We can't be broken. We are living creatures. We can be healed. And most of the time, healing isn't something you have to do. Healing is something you just have to set the stage for. So if you start showing yourself more love, you will feel more loved over time. It's just like, imagine if you cut your finger. You don't have to do anything other than just keep it clean and leave it alone, and it'll eventually heal. I found that if the therapy style that you're doing isn't working for you, try something different. If there's no changes, like real changes within 6 months or a year, try something different. Because once I found a style that worked for me, the somatic therapy and the EMDR, I have not had a panic attack. They're gone. They can go away. You can heal them. You can cure them. You don't have to live like that forever. I have not had a debilitating spell of depression. I used to get so depressed that I would actually get tunnel vision. There was times I couldn't drive because I couldn't see. And then I was afraid to drive because I would think to myself, I was in so much pain that sometimes I would see a semi truck coming the other way, and I would think to myself, if I just swerved, the truck driver and the truck wouldn't be harmed at all because my car is small, and everyone would think it was an accident, and I just wouldn't have to be here anymore. So, and I don't hate that person who is that depressed. I love her. If you had a friend who was thinking in that way, you wouldn't judge them. You would love them. So use your imagination. Pretend that you're not you. Find a therapy that works and know that they can. I had no idea that life could be enjoyable. Man, I'm out here like sweating and crying. It's about 90 degrees. There's a lot of other things that I did that I don't know if they worked or not. I have to admit that diet and exercise, I know no one wants to hear this, but eating more whole foods, things that grow out of the ground or run around on legs, like I don't, whether you're a vegetarian or not, if you want chicken, get real chicken. Don't get like chicken nuggets. Like, get real chicken. If you want to, to eat vegetarian, eat actual vegetables. Don't just eat chips and salsa because they're technically vegetarian. If you feed a pet substandard food, that pet will be listless and their fur won't be shiny. And a lot of our body chemistry, our neurotransmitters, things like dopamine, serotonin, they get broken down and recycled in the digestive system. So if we're feeding ourselves a bunch of crap all the time, it's really hard for you to make those good chemicals. Sleep is super important. If you had, like I said, if you had a child or a pet or dog or a cat, and you just kept them stuck in a dark room, you fed them bad food, and they didn't have a regular sleep schedule, and they're not getting activity, they're going to be miserable. They're going to start pulling out their fur and stuff like that. So you have to do it before you feel it. Like, you're not going to want to go for a walk. But if you do just force yourself to do it a few times, you'll start feeling slightly better. And then after a long enough time, you start to enjoy it, and it gets better and better and better. It doesn't have to be like, I don't live in the gym. I go like twice a week for like silly little Zumba dance classes, and I just go for like 20-minute, 30-minute walks, things like that. I don't diet, but I make sure that I have actual real sit-down meals with real fresh vegetables, real fresh food, not just processed things. Take a look into what processed stuff does to your body. It's not good. And prioritizing making a good life for myself before I felt it, because the feeling happens after the action. And it's a good thing and a bad thing that unless you are wealthy enough that you can afford a full-time personal assistant, full-time personal trainer, and full-time nutritionist, you are the one who's going to do that for you. I don't have the money for any of those things. I don't have a personal trainer. I don't have a nutritionist. But what I do is I say, okay, I could have this bag of sour cream and onion potato chips, or I can have an actual baked potato with some cheddar and some broccoli and a little bit of bacon, and it's better tasting, and it's better for me. And you deserve real food. You deserve real rest. I did some other things that might be a little woo-woo. I listen to subliminal messages when I sleep, because the last thing that I want to mention is that unless you have the sort of PTSD where your life was pretty darn good and then something major and traumatic happened once, like you were in a natural disaster. Most of us who had like childhood trauma and things like that and bad relationships, our PTSD was built up a tiny little grain of sand at a time. It happens very, very slowly over time. So the way to heal from it is to heal very, very, very slowly over time. So there was not one like big moment where I just all of a sudden was like, oh, I'm not depressed anymore. It was just every day it was just a little bit brighter. And it wasn't like a straight up path. There were some dips and lows and highs. When my cat Freckles died, it brought me back pretty low. But I got over that by thinking to myself, okay, if I loved this animal who's sitting right here, if I loved this animal as much as I loved Freckles, what would I do for this animal? I would let her cry, but I wouldn't let her stop eating and stop going anywhere. I wouldn't I would make sure that during her grief, I would support her and love her through it. So it's not a big grand gesture that you have to do. And the other thing I think that stops people from healing from trauma and PTSD is we feel like it's going to be scary and terrifying. We think that we have to face our inner demons and we have to, look into our shadows and dredge up horrible things from the past. Guess what? You do not have to. You actually don't even need to remember the horrible things that happened in the past. Sometimes you do have to talk about them a little bit to a therapist just so they know they know your backstory. But sort of like the same way, it's like if you show up at the emergency room with a broken leg, they don't need to keep researching what kind of object you fell on or whatever. They need to just focus on the leg. So the nice thing about healing from trauma is you don't have to relive all that trauma. You don't have to sit there and open up those old wounds. You're not re-stabbing those wounds. You're putting a gentle ointment on them and putting a soft, clean bandage on them, and then giving yourself love and rest and affection while it heals naturally. Because just like it's natural to get injured, it is natural to heal. I'm sure I forgot some things, but I just want every single one of you to know that, so I also cry when I'm happy, that you are worth taking good care of. And even if you're in a place right now, I've been homeless, I've been addicted, I've been depressed, even if you are literally walking through hell, there are so many better things that can come for you in the future. And it doesn't have to be like this. You are worthy of care. And if when I say that, there's a voice in your head that says, no, you're not, that's the inner critic. That is a great thing to hear, because that shows you exactly where you need to go. And don't believe it. Don't believe it. I love you, my friends. Thank you.